Revelation chapter 18 is a long chapter, and we're going to read it all this morning. The title of the message this morning is The Fall of Babylon the Great. And in Revelation chapter 17, we saw an image of the woman riding the beast, the scarlet beast, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. It was empowered by the dragon, who is the serpent of old, the devil. And we made a conclusion that the woman, the city that sits on 7 hills, is actually Rome and the Vatican City. No doubt about it, in my mind, and many theologians. The woman specifically is the Roman Catholic Church. So when you talk about Rome, you talk about Vatican, you mean, it's like a metonym for the Roman Catholic Church. When you say the Vatican, you know, the Vatican issued a statement today. Well, it's not actually the Vatican, it's the city, it's somebody in the Vatican. That's what we call a metonym. It's like a figure of speech, and so the two go hand in hand. And but it was interesting, towards the end there, we saw that the woman also sits on many waters. So that can't be Rome. That doesn't fit the profile. So you've got to do a profile of who these cities are or where they are, because Rome doesn't have a natural harbour. It doesn't sit on many waters. In fact, it's about 22 kilometres from the coast. It doesn't have a natural harbour. And Emperor Claudius in the AD 40s, he actually built a port. It was called Portus. I suppose that's where we get the word port from, or harbour. And so he built like an artificial harbour there. And then there was a road. All the roads in Italy, they called via something. So it was called Via Portuensis, a 24-kilometre road that connected Portus to the city of Rome. So Rome wasn't a city that sat on many waters. You can't say that. So it's interesting because it's definitely in chapter 17, Babylon the Great, or Mystery Babylon, is Rome. But then when you get to chapter 18, it's different. It transforms into another city. And that makes sense because we've got this 2,000-year gap between the 1st century and the 21st century, where we're headed for most likely the end of times, because it's been 6,000 years since creation. And that was a view held by the early church fathers. It was a view held by Irenaeus, who was a disciple of Polycarp, and Polycarp was a disciple of John the Apostle. So they would have really got the information of what the early fathers, church fathers, believed. And they believed that it was only 6,000 years in the whole of history, or 7,000 years, including 1,000-year millennial kingdom at the end. So we discovered that the best city in the 21st century that fits the profile and the prophecy of the city that sits on many waters is, in fact, New York. It does sit on many waters. In Revelation 18:18, the sailors and the ship's captains of the world, which we're going to read in a moment, they all travel by sea. They exclaim, "Was there ever a city like this great city?" And of course, we have the excellent quote that I showed last week by John Lennon, who died in 1980, I believe. He was killed. "If I'd lived in Roman times, I'd have lived in Rome. Where else?" Today, America is the Roman Empire, and New York is Rome itself. A very prescient statement, I believe, because there's been other people who have said similar things. But the conclusion is that the new Rome, or Babylon the Great, is New York, and we're going to see today, at the halfway mark, that this city will be destroyed in 1 hour. That's what it says about Babylon the Great. Amazing. I mean, we've never seen anything like that before, and we will see this in the future, and the world will mourn its passing, as she is the new harlot who has seduced the world with its trade with her. And it's all about trade. When we read Revelation 18, we're going to see about the trade that the merchants of the world, or the countries of the world, do with America, and specifically New York, because New York is the epitome of America. And America is the greatest trading nation in the world. So let's have a look at Revelation 18, verses 1 to 24 here this morning. It's quite a bit to read. That's why I want to try and get through this as quickly as I can. Revelation 18, verse 1. "After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven. He had great authority, and the earth was illuminated by his splendour. With a mighty voice he shouted, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a home for demons and a haunt for every evil spirit, a haunt for every unclean and detestable bird. For all the nations have drunk the maddening wine of her adulteries. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries." Just think New York or America when you read this. "Then I heard another voice from heaven say, 'Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues. For her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her crimes. Give back to her as she has given. Pay her back double for what she has done. Mix her a double portion from her own cup. Give her as much torture and grief as the glory and luxury she gave herself. In her heart she boasts, 'I sit as queen, I am not a widow, I will never mourn.' Therefore in one day her plagues will overtake her, death and mourning and famine. She will be consumed by fire, for mighty is the Lord God who judges her. When the kings of the earth who committed adultery with her and shared her luxury see the smoke of her burning, they will weep and mourn over her. Terrified at her torment, they will stand far off and cry, 'Woe, woe, O great city, O Babylon, city of power! In 1 hour your doom has come. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her, because no one buys their cargoes anymore. Cargoes of gold, silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen, purple, silk and scarlet cloth, every sort of citron wood, and articles of every kind made of ivory, costly wood, bronze, iron and marble. Cargoes of cinnamon and spice, of incense, myrrh and frankincense, of wine and olive oil, of fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and carriages, and bodies and souls of men. They will say, 'The fruit you longed for is gone from you. All your riches and splendour have vanished, never to be recovered.' The merchants who sold these things and gained their wealth from her will stand far off, terrified at her torment. They will weep and mourn and cry out, 'Woe, woe, O great city, dressed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls. In 1 hour such great wealth has been brought to ruin. Every sea captain and all who travel by ship, the sailors and all who earn their living from the sea, will stand far off. When they see the smoke of her burning, they will exclaim, 'Was there ever a city like this great city?' They will throw dust on their heads, and with weeping and mourning cry out, 'Woe, woe, O great city, where all who had ships on the sea became rich through her wealth. In 1 hour she has been brought to ruin. Rejoice over her, O heaven. Rejoice, saints and apostles and prophets. God has judged her for the way she treated you.' Then a mighty angel picked up a boulder the size of a large millstone and threw it into the sea and said, 'With such violence the great city of Babylon will be thrown down, never to be found again. The music of harpists and musicians, flute players and trumpeters will never be heard in you again. No workman of any trade will ever be found in you again. The sound of a millstone will never be heard in you again. The light of a lamp will never shine in you again. The voice of a bridegroom and bride will never be heard in you again. Your merchants were the world's great men. By your magic spell, all the nations were led astray. In her was found the blood of prophets and of the saints, and of all who have been killed on the earth." It's a big chapter, and chapter 17 and 18 form one of the longest prophecies. I think it's the longest prophecy in the Bible. So we're going to go back to Revelation 18 verses 1 to 3, and there's an announcement by an angel. "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great." Now, I don't know if you remember back in our series in Revelation 14, verse 8, the timeline of the 5 angels and how the 5 angels have a declaration. Well, the second angel, do you remember what the second angel said at the midpoint? "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great." And the way that this declaration is written is, it's in the past. It's written in the sense that New York has done this to herself, because it's what we call the active voice. So it's not, the passive voice is when something else does the action on you. So for example, John hit the ball, or the ball was hit by John. John hit the ball. They're saying the same thing, but one's an active and one's a passive. So wherever it's got by, the actor, then that's a passive. But this is in the active voice. So this means that New York has done this to herself. Otherwise, it's not something done to her, in other words. So when you get Rome, the city on the seven hills, it doesn't really compare to New York, the city of the seven seas. Really, does it? So what has she done to herself then? Well, the Bible tells us she has become a home for demons and a haunt for every evil spirit. For all the nations have drunk the maddening wine of her adulteries. In other words, she's become drunk with her own intoxicating power. So there is that comparison to Rome, who became drunk on the saints, on killing the saints, it says in Revelation 17. But the kings of the earth with New York, or this Babylon, this new Babylon, have become drunk because they've fornicated with her because of her riches. And now in the 21st century, the 20th and 21st centuries, America has come to the forefront, and the kings have, in other words, spiritually fornicated with America and her power. But that is all about to end. We see that, don't we? Everyone kowtows to America as being one of the main nations. I mean, the President of the United States, no matter what you think of him, is the chief CEO of the world, really. Because even we've seen the way that they can influence nations. Even though Israel, little Israel, with only 10 million people or so, is saying, no, we're going to go it alone if America doesn't support us. But America has been supplying arms and armaments to Israel in its battle. But it's trying to pull the strings. It's trying to make things happen. And why? It's all about voting. It's all about elections. That's what they say. It's politics. It's all about politics. We know that the greatest headquarters of politics is in the United Nations, in New York, on the ocean there. The building is right on the sea, in the harbour. Related to the politics? I definitely think it's politics. I'll talk to you afterwards about what I really believe, but it's a bit of a long conversation. But I don't think it's as it appears to be. Yeah, so it's an interesting question though. Now, in the angel's timeline in Revelation 14, we saw that the beast comes up out of the abyss at the halfway point of the 7 years. And immediately after the beast rises, he wants to be rid of Babylon. And Babylon is a system as well. It's not just a city, it's a system. And we all live in this new world order, Babylonian system, or we're going to be, and we can see the screws tightening. Already, I've seen several YouTubes on the fact that, do you know, there's a bank in Australia that now won't give you cash. And we think, oh yeah, well, that's the Macquarie Bank. We know that. But they just see that as incredibly sort of new world orderish, and the fact that you can't use cash. You can't use cash in that bank anymore. Well, it's coming to a theatre near you. It's coming to all the banks. It's just a start. It's coming to America. This is the Babylonian New World system, so that we can go cashless. And so it's all about control. And I've said this several times, but the CBDCs are coming. There's no doubt about that. They've come out and said in the next 12 to 24 months, we will have CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. It'll all be on your phone. And this is the way it's all been pushed. I just had a letter come to me on Friday saying that now the ANZ Access cards will be no more. And we're not going to issue any more deposit books. You won't be able to use cheques. Not that I use cheques. But this is, it's the screws are tightening in the financial world. I mean, I could speak to you for an hour on this stuff, but for the sake of this, we want to concentrate on Revelation chapter 18. So, the beast, who is the Antichrist, wants to be rid of the system because it really doesn't. Remember, the woman rides the beast, the harlot rides the beast, but then at the end of chapter 17, we see that the beast gets rid of the woman, gets rid of the system, and wants to install his own system because now he's the end of her usefulness. Her usefulness has ended at the halfway point, and then he'll install his own religious system as well. And who will we worship? Or who will the world worship? The beast himself. It'll be satanic worship via the Antichrist. So he gets rid of the kings, or at least 3 kings, and installs his own. Now, this statement, fallen is Babylon the Great, it's in the past tense, but you think, well, this is in the future, isn't it, Steve? Well, it's what we call a prophetic past tense. So it's announcing a future event. It's something that has already taken place. And in God's economy, God's mind, this has already taken place because he sees the end from the beginning. And so this is already going to happen. This is a declared thing that's going to happen. Now, note also it says Babylon will be a haunt for every evil spirit, a haunt for every unclean and detestable bird. Now, this is a throwback to the original Babylon. If you go to the Babylon right now in Iraq, the original Babylon, where the Tower of Babel was built, it is a haunt for evil birds or for every evil spirit. There's nothing there. Nobody's built on that site. And there's jackals, there's wolves, there's owls, and all these things. So it's a throwback. It's back to this original prophecy. This is going to happen to New York again. So there's sort of like the connection. Now, anyone seen this movie, Wall Street? Gordon Gekko. It's a make-believe thing, but it's like a composite of what happens in the financial capital of the world, Wall Street. And Gordon Gekko, the character in this film, says, greed is good, because it makes the world go round. Greed is right. Greed works. I haven't actually seen the film, but I've heard about this statement. And the reason that God gives that why the kings of the earth committed adultery with her, or fornication, it sort of says, is that everybody's fallen under America's spell. Everyone has grown rich and committed the idolatry of materialism because America buys everybody's goods to satisfy Wall Street. And I'm going to expand on this a little bit in a moment. But let's have a look at verses 4 to 8, where there's a very interesting statement in verse 4. It says, come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, and so forth. So this, you've probably heard this statement before. There's a voice from heaven, gives the instruction ahead of time for what we must do. Is it just talking to Americans to come out of America, or New York, the people who live in New York? It's probably about 9 or 10 million. Is it just for them to come out of New York? No. I think it's all of us to come out of the system. That's what it's saying. Come out of her, my people. Are you one of God's people? Well, you've got to come out of the system. That's what it's saying here. How do we get out of the system? Now, that's another question. That's a very difficult question. I don't know how we get out of the system, but maybe it's doing things like using cash. Do you know when cash disappears, a physical representation of money disappears? So what if the internet crashes? What if your computer crashes? What if your phone doesn't work? What if your phone gets stolen? What are you going to do? They can just shut it down. The physical representation of currency or money is going to disappear. Now, we have to leave the system, its trappings. But I think most people won't. And why is that? Anybody seen The Lord of the Rings or read the books? I read this when I was in school. And remember Gollum had the ring of the Fellowship? And Frodo Baggins, he took the ring. Remember that? What happened to them psychologically with that ring, which represented material wealth? Remember J.R. Tolkien? This is like a metaphor for Christianity. I believe Tolkien was a Christian. It was like an allegory. They wouldn't take the ring off. They just loved it so much. And that's like material wealth. We can't get rid of it. It's very hard for us to counteract that sort of love of material goods. It was very intoxicating. And I think what's happened is that people have become intoxicated by the power of riches and material goods. But God says that we are to come out of her, and the reason is so that we will not receive and share in the plagues that are about to come in the second half. Coming out of her will primarily mean not taking the mark of the beast. So if we take the mark of the beast, the end is over. Now you might think, oh, Steve, there's no way I'm going to take that. Maybe you think I'm not even going to be here. Fair enough, but what if you are? Yeah, right at the very end that happens. Yeah, right, the bowls of wrath. I think it was the first one. You break out in sores, but you've still got 3.5 years. I think that entire second half is going to be, the beast is going to be enforcing his system and his mark for worship. And so this is the dangerous thing. Now, we need to, but before that occurs in the last half, every Christian refugee will have the opportunity to be protected in a safe place, a secret place, it says in Psalm 91, in southern Jordan. Actually, Daniel 11:41 talks about the only place in the world that the beast can't, his tentacles don't reach, is southern Jordan. It talks about Ammon, Moab, and Edom. It's the only places. And also Joel talks about the refugees. There is salvation on Mount Zion. That could probably have a double meaning. We have salvation from Mount Zion, or what occurred on Mount Zion, the fact that Christ died. But it could have a physical meaning too, because it talks about refugees. And for those people who are in Judea at that time, on the doorstep of southern Jordan, there's going to be protection for 1,290 days, the second half. And they're going to be taking refuge in the Pink Mountains of Jordan, the wilderness. And this was traditionally a place of refuge over millennia for God's people. It was in the Babylonian days, and it was in Jesus' days as well, the Transjordan it often refers to. So this is something to consider. Now, who's heard of this poem? Now, this is a poem written by Emma Lazarus that is called The New Colossus. It was written in the 1880s, and it was written because France was giving to America a gift, a statue called the Statue of Liberty. And Emma wrote this poem called the New Colossus, because there was the original Colossus, one of the 7 wonders of the world, in Rhodes, and it was a 33-metre high statue of Helios, I think it was, the god Helios. And so this is sort of like a similar thing. She wrote this poem to say this is the new Colossus of the 21st century. Now, New York boasts that she is the queen of the earth, which is exemplified by this physical symbol as you enter the harbour, the Statue of Liberty. It's right there as you go in, and there was an island there where all the refugees, all the immigrants would go to this island called Ellis Island, I think it is. And so they would, this is where they'd be processed, and right next to it is this Statue of Liberty. And this, Emma calls this statue, and it's, if you go there, you can have a look at this. There's a plaque there. She called it the Mother of Exiles, because America was the great immigrant nation of the world, and she would welcome people into America. She even calls it the air-bridged harbour that the Twin Cities frame. So it talks about this. Interesting. This is what America was built on, the welcoming of immigrants. But interestingly, in February 1939, everyone heard of the Madison Square Gardens in New York? It's where they do a lot of boxing, have big boxing matches. Interestingly, there was a meeting by the American Nazis. There was a lot of Nazis in America. We think the Nazis were only in Germany, but they were supporters of fascism. They even, in this meeting, there was 20,000 Americans in this meeting in February 1939, upholding fascism. And they even declared, they had a big picture of George Washington as being, he was the first fascist, you know, the founder, the founding father of America. So fascism wasn't just limited to Germany and Italy under Mussolini. It was in America as well. And we know that one of the perpetrators and supporters of eugenics, anyone heard of eugenics? It's where they say that, look, the survival of the fittest, we want to get rid of the people who have disabilities, and we just want to purify the genetic pool. Now, we know that that's evil. Well, America was a great supporter of that. So I'm not trying to down America here. I'm just trying to reveal some of the truth there, because a lot of our best friends are American missionaries who we work with. But I'm just talking about these symbols here, the Statue of Liberty, because it ties in with what we read in Revelation chapter 18. You know, the Queen of the earth. Come out of her, my people. Now, let's have a look at verses 9 to 20 now. So it gives us a further picture of what's going to happen. It says, in 1 hour she will be destroyed. In verse 10 it says that. Woe, woe, O great city, O Babylon, city of power. In 1 hour your doom has come. And then further down in verse 17, it says, in 1 hour such great wealth has been brought to ruin. And then it lists some of the things that she has bought. Interesting, cargoes of gold, silver, precious stones, fine linen, every kind of ivory, iron and marble. Interestingly, that can't be Rome, because marble is ubiquitous in Italy and in the Middle East. So she wouldn't need to buy marble, she has it. America's the great buyer of goods in the world.
Before it gets destroyed, when does this happen in the timeline of the day of the Lord?
I believe New York gets destroyed as soon as the beast comes up out of the abyss, because it's going to be one of the first things on his agenda. Very first thing is going to be on his agenda is to get rid of the 2 witnesses, prophets. Halfway mark. Because remember our timeline of the angels? The second angel, so we've got the first angel timeline, which is the first half. The second angel is the midpoint. The third angel is the last half. It talks about the mark of the beast. And then we've got angel 4 and 5, which talk about the very end. But yeah, it's a halfway point. Now, the merchants and the kings of the world mourn when they see the smoke of her burning when New York is destroyed so suddenly from the ships. Now, there's no way that you would see that in the Mediterranean Sea with Rome. This has got to be New York, in my opinion. I mean, not everybody believes this, by the way, just as a caveat. But this is what I've come to see. Hundreds of years ago, it would have been impossible for a large city to be destroyed so suddenly, and it must have frightened John in his vision. But now, since 1945, we know that this is possible, don't we? At Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they were destroyed very, very suddenly with the first nuclear bomb. And Babylon at the end is the city of power, it says in verse 10. Not only is it a city of wealth, a city of greed, but it's the seat of world power, with the United Nations being situated there, the building there, you can look it up. And what is the reason that the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her destruction? They say, basically they say, who's going to buy our stuff anymore? That's why they're worried, because it's going to affect them. And so verses 12 and 13 say that. All the things that they've been buying. Now, it tells us all the different kinds of things that America buys and trades in. Who's the largest buyer of goods in the world? Sorry? Which store? Walmart. It used to be Walmart. I don't know, Amazon might have taken them over, I'm not sure, but the study I've done, it says Walmart. But look at verse 13. I'm not going to focus on everything here, there's not enough time, but it says that it trades in the bodies and souls of men. That's not America, is it? Or is it? Absolutely it is. Modern slavery. What does that mean? I thought that slavery was abolished in the 1860s under Abraham Lincoln. That's where modern slavery comes into the picture. Read about Jeffrey Epstein and his sex trafficking? Killed himself in jail that long ago. What about abortion? who aborts their babies in greater numbers than anybody else in the world. That's murder. Videos released by anti-abortion groups have drawn attention to a little-known practice: the buying, selling and research use of fetal tissue acquired from abortion clinics. Well, tell me, is fetal tissue a person? When does a person become a person? Upon conception. The very initial part of conception, it's a baby. It's a baby. A baby is a person. But they say there's no other tissue that can help them in their research. It has to be fetal tissue. Baby body parts are big business across the world. And we know that even in Australia now, it's just diabolical. Even in Queensland, it's legal to get an abortion up to nearly, I think it's right up to nearly the end, isn't it? Anybody know that? But scientists at major universities and government labs have quietly been using fetal tissue for decades. They say it is an invaluable tool for certain types of research, including the study of eye diseases, diabetes and muscular dystrophy. This is what they need fetal tissue for. So in verses 10, 17 and 19, it does say that Babylon will be destroyed in 1 hour. And this is all, I think it's part of the judgment upon the new Babylon. In 2011, at a dinner, Vladimir Putin boasted that he could destroy America literally in half an hour because they've got weapons. They're probably the only nation that could do so. But the reality is that this is not a judgment from Russia or Putin. This is a judgment from God. Look at what it says in verse 20. Rejoice over her, O heaven. Rejoice, saints and apostles and prophets. God has judged her for the way she treated you. So God uses maybe Russia, we don't know, to judge this new Babylon. Now, who is the you here? God has judged her for the way she treated you. It must be Christians who have been martyred and killed by the two Romes since the beginning of time in the Roman Catholic Church. It's probably for the way that she's treated unborn babies as well. And there will probably be many people who have been brought under the control of the Babylonian system just before her destruction in the 3.5 years prior to the end. And what's a real worry is this pandemic treaty that's coming by the WHO, which is going to be voted. I believe it's been watered down a little bit, just the language, because they know there's kickback on it. But it's going to come through in a surreptitious way. They're going to sort of try and bring it through gradually so that we will be under the rule of the WHO. We'll have to do, if there is a pandemic, then we will have to go under their rules. This is what's coming this very month. So, America's merchants in verses 20 to 24. Now, I've only just done a really light cover over this, but 21 to 24, it talks about no musicians, no workmen of any trade. The light of a lamp will never shine on you again. The voice of a bridegroom and bride will never be heard in you again. Why is that? Because it's going to disappear. Your merchants were the world's great men. Now, that's worth spending a little bit of time on. These companies are called the Magnificent Seven. Now, you thought that was a movie in the 1960s. Well, it was. But this now in Wall Street, all the stockbrokers refer to these companies as the Magnificent Seven. Do you know who they are? Meta, who does Facebook, Microsoft, Bill Gates, Nvidia, which is an over $1 trillion company. Same with Apple, Tesla, Amazon, and Alphabet, who owns Google. These are the Magnificent Seven. These are the merchants of the world. Do you know that these 7 companies have a combined value of $13.1 trillion American? That's more than the value of all the stocks of Japan, France, and the UK combined. These companies control the world, and the men behind these companies will control the world. These are the great merchants of the world. We are becoming, it'll be less about nations and it'll be more about the Magnificent Seven and the merchants of the world who will control the world.
So in 17 and 18, are they the companies that it's talking?
Not necessarily. I'm just saying that it talks about generally the merchants of the world, but where are the merchants of the world located? They're all American companies. And so these are Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos. Who's Jeff Bezos? Amazon CEO. Mark Zuckerberg. Meta. Tim Cook. Apple. It was started by somebody else, I can't remember his name. Steve Jobs, yeah. Larry Page. That's Alphabet. Jensen Huang. I hadn't heard of him before. That's Nvidia, I think. Elon Musk. Know that one, Tesla. These guys, he even owns X now, which was Twitter. So he's got control of some of the media. And Australia's having a big argument with him at the moment about the broadcasting of the stabbing down in Sydney.
And he wants to control space as well.
Yes. But I haven't even mentioned the two asset managers who own the world. Two American companies. Who are they? BlackRock and Vanguard, together with Street. These are stockbrokers or fund managers who, together with State Street, they own 20% of America's companies. And it's been said, and I've got the quote here in the reference, it's been said that by 2028 they could own almost everything. You know, every Australian company on their register, on their stock register, has BlackRock or Vanguard. They don't own the whole company, but they own significant portions. What's it worth if they own almost everything in the world? $20 trillion? That's what we call an oligopoly. I can say monopoly, but oligopoly. Try and say that 3 times in a row. So how will these merchants take over the world in the first 3.5 years? It says, by your great magic spell, all the nations were led astray. That's the word, some versions have sorcery and magic, but it's actually the Greek word pharmakia. And that's where we get the English word pharmacy. In other words, drugs. Now, back in the day, there was no such thing as drugs in that world. There probably was, but not like what it is today. In other words, we've been drugged into following this American narrative, or this Babylonian narrative, and we've all drunk the same Kool-Aid, as they say in America. Heard that saying before? Think you've drunk from that Kool-Aid. So finishing up today, these are the pictures of some of these influential people. You can see up the top Oprah Winfrey, and she's very influential as well. Heard of Pax Romana and Pax Americana? What does Pax Romana mean? The Peace of Rome, which it was the Peace of Rome that established peace in the world, not through good means, but through their force, through their soldiers, through their army, the Roman army. For 500 years, Pax Romana ruled. What do you see at the top there? An eagle. What about Pax Americana, the peace of America, keeping the peace? What do you see there? An eagle. Eagle is also the symbol of Nazi Germany as well. Interesting. So what I'm saying here is that both Rome and America have controlled the world with their Pax Romana and Pax Americana. And this is all in preparation for the beast. God's going to judge America and the Roman Catholic Church, and it's going to be replaced and destroyed. The beast is going to set up his own agenda, because that last 3.5 years, or 1290 days, the devil himself, and the reason is that he's going to be cast down to the earth at the halfway point, because he's going to be defeated by Michael and his angels. So the devil and his angels will be defeated and thrown down to the earth. Also, the abyss will be opened up, and the demonic hordes out of the abyss will come up in the form of locusts as well, it says in the book. Revelation chapter 9, and together all hell is going to break loose during this time. Now, this is a pretty scary message, I know, but this is the truth. Even if it's not America, it's going to be something similar. But I can't see how it couldn't be, because they're the biggest guy on the block. It's like Nazi Germany. How can they not be involved? It's the biggest guy. It's the worst perpetrators of anti-Semitism ever in history. Cannot be not be involved. So he'll perhaps even indwell the Antichrist himself. What do you ever remember? Did the devil ever indwell anybody? Judas. And what was Judas called? The son of perdition in John 17. But it's also used of the Antichrist, the son of perdition. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3, he is also called the son of destruction or the son of perdition in the King James Version. And so it's used to describe Judas, but also the Antichrist, because perhaps he indwells the Antichrist as well. Perhaps that's the link. Together, Rome and New York, or America, have destroyed the world through its religious, political, media, and financial empires. Now, you might think it's been a good thing. We've gained riches out of this system. Well, of course. That's what they said here in Revelation 18. So when it's destroyed, it's taken away, people find that very difficult. So you might say, well, what am I to do with all this information? What are we to do right now before its final destruction? Good question. Well, I think we need to follow this, what it says here. We're given the instruction. What does it say? In verse 4? Come out of her, my people. And where do we go? It's all very well getting out of the system. It might mean metaphorically as well. Get out of the system, use cash, buy material goods, store up food maybe. I don't know. I'm not telling you what to do. But somehow you've got to come out of the system, because the system is tightening its screws and control is coming. It already is there. They already know what you're doing through your phone, through different things. So I think we need to come out of it as best we can. Where do we go? Well, I've got a theory, and you know what that theory is. At the halfway point, I think we've been called to go to southern Jordan. That's the only secret place. That's the only place that's out of the reaches of the Antichrist. And it's a place of refuge it talks about. So we need to take refuge somewhere. Now, some people say, oh, well, that could be anywhere. You know, I'll just go to the mountains here. Well, it doesn't say that. I had a guy ask me, surely, Steve, there'd be a place in Australia where we can take refuge. Show me in the Bible where it says that. There's only one place. It's a traditional place, Petra and southern Jordan. Anyway, food for thought. You might not believe it, that's okay. Let's finish in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you now for your word.